Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Tear It Down podcast. It's Michael here, and who we got today?
Ellis is here. Hello everybody.
And also Mark. I'm back by popular demand to join another thrilling podcast with Michael and Ellis.
Back from outer space.
So we're talking today about the super subject of AI. I had a lovely article published in the Isle of Wight's Observer, which if anyone wants to read it, it's at the Isle of Wight Observer.co.uk, I think, and it's generated a lot of interest, so we thought we'd have a discussion about AI and its implications for not only solicitors but for businesses generally. AI, fans or not?
I mean, you go first because you've been a bit controversial over this, whereas I'm an easy please. I think it's the most phenomenal thing ever. Scares the absolute bejeebies out of me, but that's just because I like sci-fi movies. But otherwise, I think it's fantastic.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say my opinion is controversial. I think ultimately it's a given. We now live in a world where AI will essentially take over, and I don't mean sort of iRobot style. I mean in terms of revolutionising basically every industry that there is, either for the good or for the better. I agree with you. I think it's very scary, and I think it's probably gone under the radar with most people in terms of everyone is happy to make lovely little portraits of themselves on ChatGPT, but potentially they don't understand the repercussions, and particularly in terms of feeding information into it, and I'm sure we'll touch on the copyright subject. And as a side note, I did a little bit of reading about the environmental impact of AI, and that's also quite scary. So I just think I'm wary of it, but ultimately I have accepted it is an inevitable, which is easy for everyone to say.
Yeah, I think it is quite interesting from a society, politically, economically, legally. They're all hot topics really, which is going to radically change how we all live. We'll probably, before it hits the mainstream, I think we're a few years away, but I think businesses are very much jumping on the AI bandwagon, and they say in the States, come September, October, there'll be a huge cull of workforce, if it's not happening already in the States. So if we're a few years behind the States, it's going to happen to us.
Well, we had that before when everyone kicked off because we were finding that they were doing all the self-checkouts at all of the supermarkets. We were going, oh my gosh, you're taking away all these jobs. But in actual fact, what it then did was it created a lot more of the shopping for you roles, because people that worked for, the supermarkets were now being asked to shop for people. I mean, you do home shopping, don't you? So you order it online, but someone's got to pack it. So therefore, that then created that. They still got to obviously keep the shelves stacked. But at the time, it didn't seem possible that would create jobs. It's just it was taking jobs away. This would be the same thing.
But I could counter that by saying at some point they will replace those people with robots. There'll be no need to get Uncle Johnny to do the loading. They'll just get a robot to do it.
It's all about efficiency, isn't it? And ultimately at some stage computers will be more efficient, if they aren't already, than humans.
Yeah, and the capitalist model, the shareholder comes first, dividends come first, and profit.
Yeah,
and so
productivity and efficiency.
And it's so it's so removed from the personal experience of the shareholder, who's usually institutional. They won't give two hoots. So it's going to have a massive impact. You think about all the delivery once the automated comes into driving a truck.
Yeah.
Once that's only a few years away. It's doing it in China now.
Yeah.
So it's going to have a massive impact on us all. And you listen to Musk, who I'm no fan of. I'm sure he's not really sleep over that, but he was asked a question the other day, and I heard him say that if you've got a child, if you have children today, there is little point in them ever wanting to go to law school or be a doctor. There'll be no need. In 30 years, there'll be literally no need for them, which is quite staggering.
So just touch on that a little bit deeper. So in 30 years, there will be no need for anyone to train to be a lawyer or a doctor, and the reason being,
whether or not it's correct or not,
but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. For what reason? Because everything's just going to be
the computers will be smarter than those people. Everything will be done by
I suppose, yeah, the pool of those professions that there already is, those roles that will have to be done by human will be a lot less, and therefore will already be covered by whoever's there, and even then they're going to dwindle because the AI is going to continue to develop and basically make humans obsolete.
Yeah.
Whether that will be in 30 years or a bit further on, there will be no need for that induction into the profession like there is now.
Yeah. The development that we've already seen in 2 years, I mean, crikey, you were going on about AI and, guys, you want to give this a go, probably about 3, maybe even longer than that.
Before COVID, I was going on about it. It wasn't very good, though, it was just annoying.
Yeah.
But in the last year to 2 years, the increase or the development and the use is so much more at such a rate of knots. We'll come on to the environmental impact in a moment because I'm quite interested in what you have to say on that. But, if that's like that in 2 years, what's it going to be like in another 2 years? We're already at a point where just in the last 6 months, every single person that I've spoken to uses ChatGPT or any of the other platforms that are available. Google AI is now just in every single time someone gets their phone out and they search something, it's automatically, they're relying on the AI element. So therefore, 30 years, really? I mean, crikey, if they've done that in the last year or so, scarily.
Yeah, and I think speaking to a few scientists who said it would take them a week to go through the data, it's now taking minutes. And it works. Its ability to handle mass amount of data and put it into a readable format is and also analysing data is quite staggering. And from a legal perspective, I think the large firms are really using it, and they're integrating AI into all the research, all their tools.
I was just about to say, we talked about this, didn't we, a couple of days ago? The 9 hours to be able to create a bundle of documents and get them all in an orderly fashion has gone down to being 15 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So who owns the... Okay, so let's just turn this to... What is AI? Right, bare basics, and start again. So, Ellis, over to you. What is AI as an overall thing, and also who owns the AI that you go on and use?
So AI is artificial intelligence. Essentially, it is a computer program, software, computerized system that can process information, can produce information, can draft documents, can produce images, can basically create anything based on the intelligence that it's been given. So it takes information that's available online, on the internet, it takes information that it has been programmed with, and essentially it's like an automated human. It then spits out the information that you ask it to. Sort of a living, breathing search engine.
And there's two types. There's closed source and open source. So closed source is proprietary. So what I mean by that is that these are AI models where the underlying code, the architecture, the training data isn't publicly available. So there's an issue for lawyers when they're uploading documents because of the risk of privilege being...
And data protection.
When you're uploading documents to... And these closed source models everyone associates with ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude,
I thought they were
Gemini.
open source.
No, they're all closed source.
Oh, okay.
Open source, I think it's like Meta's Llama, Mistral, DeepSeek's R1, as you know very well. And they are what you mentioned in terms of Leap and Leap software.
Okay.
Whereby it's ring fenced and then you are protected because they have some form of on-premises deployment to protect your data.
Right.
So what we're using, well, I don't really use AI that much in the office now. I just find maybe I'm too old now but I do ask the young ones to be very, very careful in terms of their use, because it's so powerful and it can be very cheeky.
How do you mean? Cheeky how?
They can get things wrong.
Yeah, and that's called... Is that called a hallucination when it creates information?
Hallucination, and also some of them have been rascals who have been programmers who have put little cheeky things in there. I think there was one story I read that every time someone put in, there was a keyword, there was a swear word back in it because they'd put that into the code. Right. So there's a lot of bad blood and feeling as well in terms of how they've created it. So like all these tools, we have to be very careful and treat it sensitively.
Yeah.
It's a good leveler because, you know, when you're dealing with a huge amount of documents, small firms should be using it because it helps to create and close that data down in a much more efficient way.
But who owns the AI? When you're uploading information to it, it's not just about documentation. If you're talking to this program has to answer to someone. There has to be some ownership over it. Someone must be monetizing from these different programs.
No, but the model provider, so the owners, retains full control over all the system. You're just having a license to use the results, you use the code in order to get that end results. But there's no ownership to do with anything. You're just simply having that's what you'll pay your premiums for. It's generally free to get the little quick answers.
Basic, yeah.
Is the pub open tonight? That'll be free for you, Mark. But where you have to pay a little bit, you know, then you'd have to pay your £20 a month, is it?
Yeah, something like that. And then that is reflected in the services as well, isn't it? The more in-depth work that AI can do in terms of document creation, image creation, that then feeds into the paid.
Yeah, and I think it's important to clarify that the open source that I mentioned isn't like the open source that we know it as being free. You know, the open source is not open in the traditional software sense. So Meta's Llama, which I don't use at all.
No.
It's a rubbish name, isn't it? For example, is released under a bespoke license that restricts commercial use and has thresholds and prohibits certain uses. It's under a license. So again, it's just like any other license that we've been trained and understand when we're drafting licenses. It's permission.
Yeah.
It's permission to use under certain conditions for a fee.
Well, that brings us neatly then onto if we've got a license to be able to use the information that's held within the program, and that program has got information within it that can then learn from and provide you and churn out answers. Does that program or the owners of the program have the permission to house the information that it contains within?
I don't think that's you're not looking at it the right way. You should be looking at do we as solicitors have permission from our client, because we're using their information in order to answer a particular problem that they've instructed us to respond to. So privilege can be waived if privileged communications are shared with a third party, but where we input privileged material into a closed source, the AI tool hosted by a third party, there's a credible argument that privilege has been waived. But have we had permission from the client for that to be waived? Probably not, because the risk for solicitors, being solicitors, is that they won't want their client to know that we're using AI because we want to look smart and really bright. Oh my God, that was very good. How did you get that information? Oh, it took me 7 hours. I was doing lots of research. That is misleading the client, and we've got to be solicitors. They've got to be very careful about that, because especially if we're dealing with them, most of our clients are super smart, and they're never going to not expect us to use AI. But that needs to be reflective in the fees and the time that we've spent, because I have clients who clearly use AI and they've sent me a document that's been AI created.
Yeah.
But they haven't got the skills or the resources or the knowledge, based on their lack of legal training, to apply that to what they want the answers for. That's why they've come to us.
Yeah.
But I think that should be reflective in the time and the fees that we do. If we start using it to the capacity that people say we should be. At the moment, we're still a bit sleepy, and I like it that way.
I think from my perspective, that's useful to know. But I think I was thinking at it from certainly our listeners aren't just going to be wanting to know about how we deal with things with clients and all of that. They're going to want to know whether the information that is being used to give you the answers you're looking for has as an ownership argument, where that permission has or has not been granted by the creator of said information that it's using to be able to give you your answers.
So we've had this problem with a number of clients, authors. We've had this issue whereby people have seen the various 12 months ago, 18 months ago, there's lots of stories in the States from Meta and Anthropic.
Yeah.
We're using a pirated website in order to collect thousands upon thousands of books. And many authors were saying, hang on a sec, we've not given permission for them to do that. And why are they doing this? Because they're harvesting, and we'll come on to the environmental aspect in a short while, harvesting all this data, this intellectual property, and turning it into the position where in 10 years' time they will be able to create, apparently, a new Charles Dickens, a new Jane Eyre.
Yeah, it's learning material, isn't it?
It's learning material, and they don't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And apparently there was a massive settlement that Anthropic settled
in the US.
In the US, £1 billion, but everyone got X amount. And so we were quite keen about doing it here. We thought there was a case, and of course that's still ongoing, very pre-action sense, but people are worried and scared about how that's going to infect creatives.
Yeah.
Because it can pretty much, Anthropic's known for its coding.
Yeah.
It's absolutely putting coders out of work now because they don't need it. Claude's very famous for the advertising and creating campaigns, and that's what people are using more and more.
Yeah. And the difficulty is in that particular scenario, they are taking works that have been created by someone else who haven't been compensated for that work, and they are using that information to teach their tools to then replace those people. They're using their own work against themselves, because ultimately they are, like you say, they're feeding it with as much information and documentation as possible that ultimately one day it will then take over.
So the clamour for creatives, McCartney, Elton John, thousands of other authors and writers have all written to all the newspapers to say, demanding Parliament chip in.
Yeah.
Allocate some form of AI license to compensate creatives.
Some of those AI songs and the way they replicate voices is insane.
Well, as this Tear It Down podcast opens and finishes with my tune, that was created by my genius, and we must always remember that. That wasn't
Obviously.
AI. That was,
we bow down.
That was George Formby at his best, He was in 1930s.
He was,
Northern when I'm cleaning windows. Turn that light again. And I think it's quite interesting that on the 16th of March, I think it is, this year, so next week, the government finally comes back with the responses. 11,500 responses have been received about how the government should deal with this, following a consultation from Parliament in February 25. And I'm just reading here, an overwhelming 88% of respondents supported requiring licenses in all cases. A mere 3% favoured the government's preferred opt-out approach, being that if you don't want to receive any license, you opt out of it. So help yourself, AI, to all my work.
Unless I say so.
Unless I say so. 3% people agreed with that. 0.5% supported a broad text and data mining exception, the most favourable position for AI. So who knows who that 0.5% was. But an overwhelming 88% of people demanded some form of license.
So just to be clear...
So that's going to be reported back on the 16th of March to Parliament. The 18th of March is going to be laid before Parliament, at which point we will know their plans. And I'm not too hopeful, to be honest. I think the meetings, apparently, and I'm only copying what Prav and I have said, but there have been dozens upon dozens of meetings with government ministers, high level, or with the big boys, or with the big five. I mean, crazy amount of meetings. And I'm not saying there's lots of backhanders go on, but it does seem to be the influence that these people have, resulting in whatever the
country doesn't want to be left behind either, does it?
No.
From a world perspective, the UK doesn't want to be sticking its neck out and saying we're going to restrict this, and then other countries go, well, hey, fill your boots, and then as an industry-led country, we're left behind.
My only, loads of concerns, but that type of idea that we don't want to be left behind, I get that, but it'd be really lovely to have some form of independence where we've got our own companies creating these things.
Yeah.
why we're so beholden to the Magic
US,
Five.
yeah.
These now turning to be monsters. You know, everything we do through Google. You know, we watch YouTube all the time. We're on YouTube all the time. And why can't we use our own and build up our own? And that's why they've got us by the balls completely. You know, and continue to do so. And the tax revenue is not there because we're not allowed to, because Trump threatens us with penalties if we do. So I think that's really quite annoying. If we're going to be, you know, self-sufficient and post-Brexit, why aren't we doing the massive investment?
Yeah.
You know, every city should have a science park developing code and building up these, but we don't. Which is the really depressing thing about post-Brexit.
Yeah.
You know, if you're for Brexit, back it with the independence and throw lots of money about investment. Doesn't seem to be there. Maybe I'll raise that with Nigel.
So I just going back to the Anthropics and the AI and the use of it, certainly with these authors, if the program is getting the information or the books themselves, the work, from a pirated site that is the ultimate primary infringer, is AI or that program considered as a secondary infringer and therefore still needs to be punished for it going to that site and extracting that information from it?
No, I think that in that scenario is a primary doubt that if someone is copying, then it'll be primary.
Yeah, the primary and secondary doesn't mean first and second. It means different actions.
Yeah.
So primary infringement is making copies of, distributing to the public, all of that sort of active step, and therefore it would still be primary infringement from a copyright perspective.
And that their argument seems to be, well, they don't really have an argument in the UK. In the US, it's more relaxed and it's more competitive in terms of what they can do with the copyright. Here, they don't really have any defence unless it's a mining exception.
Yeah.
Mining being, I don't mean, yes, you know, I mean, it's just collecting that data that is used for data purposes or aggregate purposes.
Yeah.
They don't have that because they're doing it to make money.
Yeah, there's a commercial benefit.
Exactly.
The exceptions to copyright infringement in the US do differ quite significantly to the UK, and that is where they are falling foul. Well, will fall foul in the UK compared to the US because of exactly that. Their remit to deal with information under fair dealing is much more limited in the UK.
Yeah, and I think it's worth, for those viewers, listeners, it's worth looking at Getty versus Stability AI, which is quite an interesting decision.
Yeah, in terms of images.
Yeah, and
so what was that called again?
And Getty versus Stability AI, which is quite a significant decision in terms of how the law addresses copyright. So, and that's of another subject, another area we could look into. But there's a few articles on the website about that.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I think, infringement, one other thing that I'm always fascinated in is how can you establish that you are the owner of that work.
Yeah.
I think if I was an owner of a song, a photographer, any creative, how do you establish that ownership where AI is now threatening that? You know, you can put it into an AI machine, get a completely different image based on your image. Sorry, a similar image based on your image. And how do you establish that that's an infringement?
Yeah.
And how do you the watermarks, the AI can remove the watermarks, they get to that stage. So, things we're thinking like blockchain, perhaps putting it on blockchain.
Yeah. Record keeping is this sort of
It is, isn't it? It's sort of trying to keep ahead of these people. And I think blockchain is the way forward for them to do that. And trying to get our heads around how we could use IP with blockchain, that seems to be uncrackable, even for the AI models. And that will give you an actual record and date stamp for when you uploaded it. So if you create something, put it on the blockchain and build up your database. We're launching this blockprotect.co.uk, there's a plug. And that's an online filing cabinet with an ability to put it on the blockchain and track where it's going and how it's being used.
Yeah.
Still in its beta stage, but that's the way we need to be ahead of the curve in this game. Because
It's the new putting it in the post and getting a post stamp.
Yeah, if not, we're all going to be left behind here. You know, even if it's not successful, at least we're trying to challenge and do something different, pushing that, you know, the market in our little way, you know. But I think the blockchain is not going away, and never has done, but it's sort of lost a little bit of kudos with all this AI stuff.
Well, I think it's, and also with the whole cryptocurrency, it was linked to that, and people are not necessarily knowledgeable about it in its entirety. They just see the news and the bad, and oh my god, everything's a scam, and unfortunately there is people that have taken advantage and are scamming people. So the actual technology, I think, has got quite a bad rap because it's been linked with the sensationalized
I know all those NFTs
and all.
It's like the pyramid scheme, isn't it?
Yeah.
But as a purely piece of kit in terms of code, I can't think of anything better than keeping a record of your work, because that's a date stamp.
Yeah.
You know, and it's pretty accurate. It still doesn't mean that. How do you distinguish your work from somebody else's? But at least it gives you some form of identity.
Yeah.
And I'd be very interested to see if there's any case law in the future about people proving that the work's been copied through AI. You know, and all how pornography's been, you know, people being using, you know, decent people are going to be abused by the AI and deep fakes. All this is a fascinating area that as lawyers we've really got to be on it. And any lawyers listening to this, they should also be thinking about that, especially if they're in the IT IP world. Obviously probably the city people are already well versed in that anyway. So it's all very interesting times ahead, but it'd be interesting to see the Parliament on the 18th of March. And maybe we'll report back on that with another article and another discussion as to how we're going forward.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, both.
I enjoyed
appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll get that uploaded so that you listeners can really sort of soak up the brains of Michael Coyle, Ellis Sweetenham, and me. And we'll see you on the next one.
That's it for the Tear It Down this week, and thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.